And that's tanked dramatically.
Ready?
I'm gonna have
Okay.
new glasses paid here. 28th of the month.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's 7:01 on Monday, June 10th, 2024, and I'm going to call this City Council study session to order. I do want to thank those joining us in the audience and online, and if Councilmember Whalen would lead us in the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just a reminder, this is a study session, so there's no public comment. I want to note for the record that Councilmember Cedar is absent this evening due to work. For staff, we have Director Madden, Director Simpson, Chief Hernandez, and City Clerk Tricia Summers. So first item on our agenda this evening, Council, is the East Pierce Fire and Rescue presentation. So I'm going to call Chief Parkinson up to the podium to get started.
Good evening, Council. I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth here to try and advance the slideshow. Hey, and look at that. We've got a mouse that's long enough. Well, again, I'm John Parkinson, the Fire Chief of East Pierce Fire and Rescue. I believe I've met all of you before, but if I haven't, hello, and if I have, then good to see you again. But I think you have this presentation in your packet. It takes me just about 5 minutes to go through, and then if there's any questions at the end, I'm happy to answer them. But just want to talk a bit about East Pierce, what we've been doing over the last year, and where we're headed for the remainder of the year. All right, so if you're not familiar with our service area, you'll see a map that's in your slide deck. But that covers everything that East Pierce Fire and Rescue covers there on the map. Milton, Edgewood, Sumner, Bonnie Lake, we completely encircle Lake, Taps, Prairie Ridge, Tahale. Most of you have probably been out to Tahale, I would assume, at some point, but it's now got over 10,000 residents out there, slated for 30,000. And then we go out and we cover the town of South Prairie by contract. We butt up against the city of Buckley. Then we head south and encircle Wilkeson, Carbonado, all the way out to the Mowich entrance to the national park. And being Milton, you're very familiar that you've got addresses on the other side of I-5. So the way that we typically say it is we cover from the west side of I-5 all the way to the base of Mount Rainier. If you can flip to the next slide. So that's 100,000 residents that live in that service area, 153 square miles. Last year we ran just over 12,500 incidents. And you'll see another larger number underneath that, which says over 30,000 unit responses. Most every emergency that we have requires more than one emergency vehicle and requires more personnel than one vehicle carries. So that means each day we have around 85 units going emergency somewhere throughout the district. And I'll get into Milton specific information in a second here, if you can go to the next slide. As far as governance, just like you have city council, the district is governed under RCW 52, and we have a board of elected fire commissioners, of which there are 7. We had 1 vacancy that's being filled next week. They're elected 6-year terms, and just like you, they're in charge of the overall policy of the district as well as setting budget. As far as our funding, we're primarily funded through property taxes, and we have 3 different taxes that we currently collect on: the fire levy, the EMS levy, and our bond levy for capital facilities projects, such as the new station down in Edgewood. You'll see a pie chart that just shows a breakout of what we're collecting in 2024, the fire levy being the largest chunk of that, and then the EMS levy next, with the bond being the smallest. In total right now, we collect $1.63 for every $1,000 of assessed valuation. You'll see a note at the bottom of that slide that says that's the lowest combined tax rate of any fire district in Pierce County. And there's not a close second to us. So we're very proud to be able to deliver the service that we can at that price. As far as what our budget looks like, you'll see at the top, it gives the number that we're just over $46.3 million this year. That's broken out into 5 different cost centers of administration, emergency medical services, logistics, prevention, and our largest division being operations. So those are our boots on the ground delivering service day in and day out. We're primarily people is the biggest part of our budget, so 85% of our budget is wages and benefits. If you can flip to the next slide. So how we serve the community day in and day out. As of right now, we have 194 full-time employees. And operationally, they deploy out of 7 fire stations, Milton being our most recent station to be staffed. But 24/7, 365, we have 6 engine companies in service, a ladder truck, 4 medic units, a battalion chief, and a medical services officer. That puts it a minimum of 31 personnel on duty, 24/7, 365. 9 of those people are split between Edgewood and Milton. And then midsummer here, we'll be adding some additional medic units, and then in early 2025, we'll be opening up our 8th fire station. That's in the Tahale community. It's about midway through construction right now. As far as our stats and what I'm going to show you is really just specific to the city of Milton. So anything that occurred beyond the city limits isn't in these numbers. But so last year in 2023, there were 1,517 incidents in the city of Milton compared to just over 12,500 in the East Pierce service area. In the city, that meant just over 3,400 emergency units came through town going to those emergencies, because again, it typically takes us more than 1 unit to handle emergencies. So over 10 times every day on average, you're going to have emergency vehicles coming in and out of the city on emergencies. So the next slide, the pie chart, that breaks out by our National Fire Incident Reporting System, just by 9 different types of incidents. And so I can describe what you're looking at. The big piece of the pie there where it says 78% is medical. So typically 3 out of every 4 911 calls we go on are going to be medical. 2/3 of those people will end up being transported to the hospital by us. Underneath that, all the other different slices of the pie typically break out into a few main categories that are all service-related calls. So they're false fire alarms, they're service-related calls, or good intent calls where somebody sees smoke coming from a neighbor's house, but it ends up being a barbecue or something like that. But that all generates 911 calls and emergency responses. The smallest piece of the pies are always going to be fire-related or hazardous materials. I'll flip to the next slide. As far as what goes on by hour of the day, the chart that you're looking at from left to right starts at midnight and then ends at 11 o'clock at night, 24 hours later. And so what we typically see across the U.S. Fire Service, and we see the same thing here, is that we're going to be busiest during daytime hours when people are up and moving around, and then overnight we tend to slow down. So for us, 2/3 of our incidents happen during the day, about 1/3 overnight. Depending on where you are, things get busier at different times, but generally around 7 or 8 in the morning as people start to wake up and start moving, the call volume starts to pick up. You can see around 10 in the morning happens to be the busy time in Milton. And then it usually starts to trail back off around bedtime. So as 8, 9 o'clock rolls around, things start to quiet down. And then just by day of the week, pretty flat chart. For the most part, we're in the low 200s from day to day. Monday happens to be your busy day of the week, but it's not substantially busier than anything else. And that kind of changes from area to area just depending on what's going on. So typically we'd see areas that have a large number of adult care homes for our seniors. Monday happens to be a busier day because that becomes their day that they have their first access in the week to medical care. So over the weekend, things tend to slow down in those facilities, but as soon as Monday hits, the medical problems that may have waited over the weekend result in the 911 call. So as far as travel time, so this is the amount of time that it takes us once we're dispatched to get to the emergency scene. So 2 numbers on screen. The one on the left says 4 minutes and 40 seconds. So that's on average. So 50% of the time, that's how long it would take us to get to the incident. The other stat is at the 90th percentile. So 8 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll be on the scene 90% of the time at 8:46 or faster. And that's typically the stat that we look at for saying what's the slowest time basically that we could expect to see. Those numbers are also probably a little bit on the high side, I guess, if you want to say it that way, because for some part of 2023, we had relocated the crew that was in Milton back down to the Edgewood station. So in about October, so you had 3 months where we were responding still from Edgewood, and then right in January, we were able to get the station here staffed once the remodel worked. And so since then, you've had your crew operating out of here 24/7, 365. As far as major milestones in the district over the last year, we brought in multiple large recruit classes. So just in the last 3 cycles of recruits, which basically span about 1 year. That was a class of 12, a class of 14, and we currently have a class of 15. Fun fact that we added up the other day, since 2017, we've hired 105 firefighters. In 2017, we employed 103. So to give you an understanding of what the organization has done just over the last 7 years or so. Those large recruit classes were brought in really for a couple things. One is attrition, just as folks retire, but the other one is for staffing, so being able to open up the Milton Fire Station, the Tahali Station next year, and then deploy some additional medic units into our system. We completed the Edgewood Fire Station. If you haven't had a chance to go down and visit it, please stop by sometime and say hi. It's a beautiful facility. We were able to open up Station 124 here in Milton. Glad to have that presence for the first time, have a crew on duty 24/7, 365, as I've said. We completed our 2022 financial audits with the State Auditor's Office and received clean audit status. We broke ground on our station out in Tahali, and back in April of this year, we did receive approval from the public on Proposition 1, which restored our fire levy. And then just looking forward here, as far as what we're working on throughout the remainder of the year and into 2025, we still have several stations in various stages of construction. So our headquarters station in Bonnie Lake and our Station 114, which is on West Lake Taps, are both set to complete in about September or early October. So that'll be 2 more facilities complete. On the heels of that, I said we have the Tahali Fire Station, and then in the next couple months, we'll be breaking ground on our last station in this cycle, which will be our Prairie Ridge Station. And then, along on the heels of that, then we're starting work on figuring out how to fund our Phase 2 project. So we sold bonds for that first set of fire stations. So we had 5 stations there. But we still have several projects that we don't have funded yet, and so that's what our board is focusing on right now, is coming up with a plan so that we never have to go back out to bond again, and so that we can live off the funding that we're currently collecting. At the top of that heap is coming up with a plan of how to replace the Milton Fire Station. As you know, we've entered into an interlocal agreement with the city to do a joint study to see if it's a project we could bite off together. If that was possible, it would make sense, I think, for both parties if it works out. And I believe it's Thursday that we have our kickoff meeting with our architect to just start that process to see if it works for both parties. If not, and it doesn't make sense for us or it doesn't make sense for you, then we'll be moving over to our site that's just across the street from Dave's in Milton. So we've got a Sumner Fire Station, significant remodel project which needs to be done. Our Foothills Fire Station, which is out off 234th near the city limits of Buckley, needs to be completely replaced. And then we have a significant need for a fleet maintenance facility as well as a training facility. We're also in the midst of updating our strategic plan. The one that you see up on screen that I handed out a few years ago ran from 2021 through 2025. We've actually done a ton of work on that and are going to be wrapping up the plan a year early, so we're completing it in 2024. So we're about halfway through the update process to have a 25 through 29 plan, and so I'll share that with you next year once it's complete. And then just kind of last housekeeping items that we'll have for this year is working on our 2025 budget, as well as having the auditors come back and work on our 2023 budget. Yay, our 2023 audit. So if you can flip to the next slide. So that is all that I have as far as keeping tabs on what's going on. Obviously, you can always invite me here. I'm more than happy to come in or give me a call whenever if you have questions. We also send out a quarterly newsletter. I believe that hit mailboxes this week. We have presence on all the social media sites. If you're into that, I'm not a social media person, but and then the bottom icon that you see there is Pulse Point. If you want to follow our incidents, it's an app that you can download onto your phone. It'll show everything that's going on in East Pierce Fire and Rescue. And of course, we have a ton of information available on our website. And that is all that I have. If there's any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Councilmember Strader?
You said you hired 117 new
105 employees since
105.
2017. Yeah.
Did you have that much attrition, or?
So probably, this is a rough number, probably 30 of those are attrition. The other is pure employee add to get our staffing levels to the level that they needed to be. So, and to give you an example of what so we have 3 people on duty 24/7 across the street. To make that happen takes us about 15 employees to make that happen. So if you extrapolate that across multiple stations, and then some stations have multiple units, it becomes a significant add to staff that many people all the time with 3 shifts, and then people are sick and they take vacation, everything else.
Did you have some attrition due to some firefighters being let go because they wouldn't get the shot?
0. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, everybody, we lost 0 people and everybody still works here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief? Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks for coming. And
Yes.
updating us with it. Just a side question, and I was looking at the hours of day counts. And you can see it go from 38 to 104 and back down to
Yep.
34 and so forth. And I can see where the residents are coming back from work or something. But what is the primary, is there a primary event that takes place between, say, the hours of 9 o'clock at night and 20 that are significantly different than the outside hours? What type of events?
So you're saying like after 9 o'clock? Was that the?
Yeah. Is it still, proportionally, what type of calls?
The call trends for us probably very different if you ask police. I would assume what goes on at different hours. For us, the trends tend to hold up very well. That three out of every 4 calls are going to be medical in nature. Certainly we have different types of years depending on what's going on with weather, or if there's some other significant event which will drive incident type. In other words, if it's very dry and hot, we're going to see more brush fires. If it's 4th of July, we're going to see more calls related to 4th of July. But all those things being equal, what we see throughout the day replicates itself overnight.
So do you have to staff a little bit heavier between those particular hours as opposed to the outside?
We do
hours?
not. No, our staffing is static throughout the year with the exception of special events. So 4th of July, we add about 10 or 12 more people on duty. And then during significant weather events, so that might be a snow event or a windstorm, et cetera, we'll add additional personnel.
All right, so you basically have a level
Yep.
staffing level
Yep.
that can
Correct.
accommodate all of this. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Hall?
How's the budget going for this last bond levy? As far as, is it gonna hold up for you?
Specifically for our bond? Yes, so our bond, we expect to be able to deliver on all 5 fire stations, plus all the equipment that we bought, and come out still in the black. Our initial projections were about $1.5 million left over. We think it's gonna be a little bit more than that. We've done very well. The reality is we lagged a little bit on getting out to bid. It took us a lot longer to do the design work and then to get through permitting processes. Oddly enough, that worked in our favor because had we been out earlier, construction prices had soared. By the time we got out, they came back down, and on all of our projects, all 4 that we have right now underway, they've all held up at about the same cost per square foot. We're seeing 10 to 12 people bid on each project. So I'm thankful to say that that's where we sit today.
And then when do you have a projected date for the next bond?
We don't expect, our goal is to never be out to bond again. Is that we're trying to do better work with saving money now to be able to pay for facilities in cash.
Mhm.
So that's, our goal is to not come back. Obviously, every time we do that, that's
Yeah.
taxing our taxpayers, which are your taxpayers. So our goal is to get out of the business of bonding.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Councilmember Whalen?
One other
Yeah.
question. What's going to impact, how is it going to impact the city and so forth with changes and so forth that are going to take place in the Milton Firehouse? There's going to be reconstruction, there's going to be other things to do and so forth. Do you have a kind of a time frame and just to speak that through a little bit?
meaning if we did construction here?
Yeah.
So, I think there's a couple answers that. Obviously, there's the funding piece of it, where the city would have to come up with the funding side, and so however long that takes. The district is ready to move forward financially with a project like that. But assuming it took a couple of years to design and raise money or whatever that process was, for us, we would likely relocate our crew down to the Edgewood Fire Station, so they would be out of position during that construction process. Still close by, but it's the ability to temporarily house that crew is very difficult for us. So that's what would likely happen during that. Most of our construction processes are taking about 18 months.
So it would be about 18 months where the station would not be, I'm using the wrong terms, would not be the full functional station, and anything else is going to be modified.
If we built on site, I would expect that I don't think there would be the ability to phase that project to where we could stay in, but those are all things that we'll be able to figure out over the next few months if that's actually, is it feasible to do it, and then what would the process look like? I would expect that we would have to be out of the building the whole time.
It's just, how to say this, we're enjoying it now.
Yes.
Separate that manpower a little bit
Yes.
further and so forth. I know you're so
Yeah.
capable of, servicing the city adequately. But it just, the changes that are going to take place, we're anticipating will be
Yeah.
substantial.
I will say that even having 2 crews, even if they're not here, but if there's 2 fire engines running at the Edgewood Fire Station, having that second unit, because what used to happen was your second unit was coming up from Sumner. And if you've driven up here during busy hours, you know how long that drive is, even with lights and sirens. So having those 2 crews up here now does make a significant difference in the response time. So even though it would be out of position, the trade-off for having a long-term facility would be well worth it.
Yeah, it's a short distance to
Yeah.
come back and forth and so forth, but much better coming from Edgewood than from any other station you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Chief, for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
So moving on to our next item this evening, it's on page 25 of your packet. It is Resolution 24-1975 for a proposed 2025 to 2030 6-year transportation improvement program. This is a discussion item only, so I'll turn the floor over to Director Madden, and then we'll open up the floor for discussion following his review.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The item before you tonight is a look at our traffic improvement program for the next 6 years, so 25 through 30. We took a look at the program as it's been submitted for the last few years. Last year, we made a significant effort on reviewing budgets for projects, making sure that they were realistic and that they were up to current costs. This year, we continued that effort. We also attempted to streamline projects that had other efforts adjacent to them. An example of that would be 28th and 161. We have a project right there to re-envision that intersection. We'd like to sync that intersection revision up with any interurban trail projects, just to make sure we're looking at intersections holistically and we see all the other efforts that may be coming adjacent to them. So just to back up for a minute, the traffic improvement program is a state requirement. It allows the city to submit for grant funding through multiple different sources. WashDOT also administers many federal grants, and so by having a TIP in place, we are setting ourselves up to be eligible for grant funding. This TIP program will come back to council for official adoption next week on the 17th. So I would like to just go through the projects one by one, unless council would like to go about it a different way.
Director Madden, can I interrupt you? I have to make a correction. I misspoke on the resolution number, so just for the record, we're referring to Resolution 24-1972. So I apologize for that misspoken resolution.
Thank you. So this program is separated into 4 different subsections. Section 1 is roadway and intersection improvements. Section 2 is traffic signals. Section 3 is transportation planning. And Section 4 is beautification and non-motorized. So I would like to just run through section 1, which is the largest portion of our projects. All right, number 1.1 is safety improvements in the vicinity of schools. This was left as it has been presented in the past with a 90-10 split on where the funding will be coming from, grant versus city. This is an ongoing project to help facilitate safe travel to and from schools within the city of Milton. Number 1.2 is the Milton Way improvement, Juniper to Porter Way. This would add additional sidewalk along that section and any kind of curb, gutter, sidewalk, or storm revisions that are associated with that project. 1.3 is Porter Way improvements, 7th Ave to West Milton Ballfield, and this would address that small section, the missing link of sidewalk adjacent to the wetland right between 7th and the Milton Ballfield. The estimated total was updated. The old number was $395,000. That was updated to our CIP cost that was identified and vetted during the stormwater planning process. 1.4 is the Milton Way improvements, 28th to Meridian. This is the uptown area improvements. It would take the existing intersection and update it or upgrade it to a full concrete intersection with additional safety devices for pedestrians to cross that area. It would also take a look at traffic and stacking between Meridian and 28th and how that's impacting pedestrian movement. Number 1.5, school pedestrian connection. This project is to build sidewalk between Porter down to the city limits down by Yuma. So from Porter Way, that intersection down the hill, which currently does not have a sidewalk for the majority of it. And that was proposed in three different projects or 3 different phases. We postponed this 1 year to a 2026 start. Primary reason for that is to stay out of construction windows from WashDOT and the adjacent 20th Street project. We could do planning before that, but I strongly feel that adding to the complexity of that intersection down there with WashDOT's work would be problematic if we pushed it forward at this time. Number 1.6 is SR 161 and 20th Ave. I mentioned that earlier. That has a budget of $800,000, and that would be to realign the intersection, new paving, curb, gutter, sidewalk, signal work. And this project was postponed for 2 years to potentially align with the interurban trail connection that would be happening in the same vicinity. 1.7 is 23rd Ave improvements, Emerald to Alder. We recently, council approved a contract with Gray and Osborne to complete design and construction drawings for this section. So we were able to keep that for construction in 2025. All right, 1.8 is Taylor Street sidewalk improvements. We took a look at this project heavily last year. We made significant changes to the estimated budget based on what our current cost is to develop sidewalks within the city and what type of stormwater improvements are needed in this section. Uh, 1.9 is 23rd Avenue from Taylor to Milton Way. The frontage improvements of the church we'll be building out in the next 6 months are a significant chunk of this section. The city is also taking a look at continuing the underground work of the power in this area and building out both bike lane and sidewalk along the south side of 23rd, so opposite from the lakeside. Number 1.1 is Milton Way Porter Way intersection. Again, that was postponed 1 year for other competing interests. We wanted to prioritize both the work on 23rd and Taylor over this one. 1.10 is Milton Way Porter Way intersection. I just went over that one, postponed a year. 1.11 SR 99 Porter Way. That is moving forward. And a 1 year was added on this project to account for any delays that the project is currently under. Next project, 1.12, 28th Ave, Birch Street to Alder Road extension. This would be a road extension behind what is currently Airstream. And it would take a road where 28th and Emerald intersect right there at the corner. And it would carry that down to towards the assisted living that is on 28th and Alder. And that project is scheduled to start in 2026. 1.13, Pacific Highway, entire city limits. That is a very aggressive project that we have identified undertaking that project in the next 3 years. WashDOT has expressed interest and has submitted grants on Milton's behalf in the last year to facilitate this work. So we are working with WashDOT to help us push this project forward and apply for grant funding. And what this would do is it would build out both lighting and pedestrian improvements from Porter Way north to the city limits. There'll also be a small section of sidewalk missing between the care facility there south of Porter Way and City of Fife city limits. And then we have the last one, 1.14, is our miscellaneous asphalt overlay. And you'll see that we've anticipated every other year an additional $800,000 in grant funds to help supplement city funds in that. Yes.
Just a question on 1.9, Taylor Street to Milton Way, 23rd on 23rd Avenue. Is that going to include any bike lane improvements? We've discussed this just recently. And we
Yes.
discussed the fact that the church that's going in needs to put in bike lanes. The 13 houses that are being built off of, well, next to, is going to have bike lanes and so forth. So when we talk about street improvements and so forth, that's all included
Correct. Yes.
to facilitate the eventual bike lanes.
Correct. Yes. The church dedicated additional right-of-way, which allowed them to build out the pedestrian improvements that the city requested, which included a bike lane.
Good. No, thank you.
Any other questions before I move on for section 1? Okay. The other sections are smaller. There's actually 3 additional projects on section 1 before I get ahead of myself. 1.15, citywide traffic calming. There's $100,000 of city funds dedicated to that. Our plan anticipates continuing the city-sponsored or city-funded project of traffic calming. 1.16 is the Oak Street improvements. We've talked quite a bit about this. Next to Milton Community Park, additional parking and sidewalk on the south side of the park are needed. And so 1.16 Oak Street improvements syncs up with a stormwater capital project, and those numbers reflect one another. 1.17, 11th Street improvements, additional stormwater and sidewalk, and that would go from Milton Way down towards City Hall, and it would create stormwater improvements and sidewalk from City Hall to Milton Way. Now we are complete with section 1. Any questions?
On 1.15, the traffic calming, what example, it doesn't seem like 600,000 is a lot of money. What kind of an improvement would that be? A small example?
Yeah, it's not a significant amount of money. It's something that project could fund now that we have or about to solidify a traffic calming program. It would give us funding to facilitate that program. We would take a look at speed radar signs. We would take a look at any kind of low-hanging or low-expense physical changes like speed humps, some of the other kind of low-dollar projects that Transpo went over when they were here back in April.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I was curious, so on 1.13, the Pacific Highway East reconstruction, after driving on the west side of that intersection, I think everybody's driven on it or familiar with it, the potholes are lovely. Will it also repair that as well? Is that part of that? I know Milton only goes up, what, to the stop sign? You know where I'm talking.
So the potholes, are those on
They're
SR
on
99?
the west side of 99. Porter comes down
Mhm.
from the east and comes to 99 across the intersection.
Okay. I will take a look at those. Any potholes within the boundaries or fog lines of SR 99 would be completed and repaired by WashDOT crews. Anything outside of those boundaries would be our team.
Okay. I just, because this weekend going through there a couple times, and I mean, you could deliberately see people avoiding those potholes. And I saw one car almost hit the other one because they swerved out around it to avoid it.
I will take a look at that. This project, 1.13, would be more of a full reconstruction.
Okay.
And so it wouldn't be looking at, operational costs or improvements. It would be looking at reconfiguring lane widths, adding a multimodal path, so a 10-foot wide path on the east side
All right.
of SR 99.
I thought it would be worth asking.
Of course.
Thank you.
Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you. Just for curiosity, is there anything available that's going to be able to illustrate how 99 in Porter is going to be developed by Washington, State of Washington Transportation, the corner, the intersection? Is there anything updated? Is there any visualization that we can see how that intersection is going to improve?
The only visuals that would kind of give you an understanding of how that intersection will improve is the City of Milton's documents pertaining to SR 99 Porter Way.
Okay.
WashDOT's improvements don't come that far north on SR 99. They actually stop at 70th to the south, right at the Fife and Milton city limits.
So the road's not widening. The only thing we're going to have is the improvements on Porter up to the light.
Correct. So your question is SR 99 changing at Porter Way?
Evidently, it's, if I understand it correctly, it's 99 is not going to change with the improvements on Porter. That'll come at a later date.
So our improvements on Porter will add a dedicated turn lane going north on 99, but those are all City of Milton projects, and they are not reflected. Any of those changes are not reflected in this 1.13.
All right, so the state of Washington doesn't have any input on that intersection during the development for Porter.
Outside of reviewing City of Milton documents and traffic control plans, no.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions, I'll move on to section 2, which is the Intelligent Transportation System, also known as ITS. We have 3 projects identified there. Milton Way Signal Interconnection, interconnecting signals at 23rd, 27th, and 28th with SR 161. That is scheduled to start in 26. And what that would do is it would focus on reducing congestion through traffic signal timing. 2.2 is the citywide street lighting improvements. That is an ongoing project to add street lights or replace street lights throughout the city. Pacific Highway East Street lighting improvements. That is installation of new illumination system along Pacific Highway East within City of Milton limits. And that is also a project that it is here because we could break it out. There will be lighting improvements as part of the 1.13, the Pacific Highway East reconstruction. But if that is not realized, having this project here allows us to add lighting throughout that corridor on our own. Any questions on section 2? All right. Section 3 is the pavement management system. This is a project that is in our CIP project list in 2024, this term. We are currently reviewing submittals for a consultant to come out, and what they do is they drive all of Milton streets and they give us a condition rating for those streets. Most municipalities do this every year. I have scheduled it here for every other year based on the number and the miles of streets that we have. We feel like we could get it done every other year, and that is a $50,000 budget. And this first time that we do it in 2024, it will give us a baseline for condition. Every other year going out, if we are able to stick to the 6-year plan, we would have a new starting point, and we would be able to then assess what streets are deteriorating faster than expected, and are there different priorities that we should be focusing on. And that's what that 3.1 project is. 3.2 is the development guideline modification. We would like to go through all of our development standards, and Transpo has actually been helping us with this, and update them to current standards. We are proposing that we'll be able to complete this in 2026. Hopefully in 2025 we can complete that. 3.3 is the West Milton Commercial District streetscape, and that is a planning level cross-section for the West Milton Commercial District, also SR 99. Our last section is beautification and non-motorized. 4.1 is our interurban trail missing link. That is estimated cost of 3.6. We have updated the total cost of this project to 4.7, and that is due to Milton's desire to go under 161 and cohabitate the WashDOT stormwater project that is building out a tunnel under that area. 4.2 is the interurban trail underpass. We've postponed this 1 year to align with the WashDOT fish window and their work. Number 4.3 is the West Milton Nature Preserve walkway. That has been a long-standing project on this list, and so it's currently scheduled for 2026. We'll have much more discussion about that next year to determine whether we would like to keep that on here or pull that off if that's still a desire of the city. But at this time, it has been on the TIP program for some time, and it was determined that we should keep it here. Number 4.4, unsignalized pedestrian crossing. What this would do is may include pavement modification, ramp changes, or those rapid flashing beacons that you'll see that have recently been installed down on Fifth Avenue. And then our last project is miscellaneous sidewalk and ADA access. This is going to be an ongoing project. Construction of new sidewalks to improve the city's pedestrian access system at various locations. So that is an ongoing project to make sure that our ramps and signal crossings are to current ADA standards. That is our list of projects for the 6-year TIP 2025-2030. Again, this will be coming back for council adoption next week at our regular meeting. Are there any other questions or concerns that council has at the moment?
Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions, and this is primarily Milton Way. between 27th and 28th, you have a center turn lane. You can get in and out. There's times during the day where the travel lane is backed up from 27th to 28th, and everybody coming off 28th just turns into the center lane and runs up to the stop sign at 28th. In a lot of cases, they generally put a little swale in the road. It's an annoyance, but you can't use it for a traffic lane. Is there any consideration, because that happens at 23rd during certain times of the day, where the westbound traffic in the lane backs up further than the entry into the turn on to the traffic light. And people come down, they probably come down from sometimes as far up as the daycare center. I forgot the name of it.
Mhm.
And they're in the center turn lane, but they're using it as a lane to get to 23rd. There's nothing to inhibit it. And in a lot of cases, they will put a little crown in the road, using the wrong term, so that it's awkward and you can't use that.
Mhm.
But that happens on several intersections on Milton Way. The worst one happens to be at 28th. Now, 28th Milton Way is also tractor trailers sit in the middle of the road to offload goods, say to Bud's or any other business. And the bus stop by 28th, which is in front of the medical building, I'm going to call it as that. Very, very often, the bus will stop and people coming off 28th or down Milton Way will use the center lane to go around them. And that creates a bit of a problem in that particular area. I don't know what could be designed to eliminate that or alleviate that. So it's just a thought for that, but those particular roads, I think, would be duly considered.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Okay. So this will come back next week, correct, Director Madden?
Correct.
Okay. Moving on to our last item this evening, it's on page 41 of your packet. It is ordinance 2086-24 for electric utility rate increase. This is a discussion item, so I'll pass the floor back over to Director Madden.
In 2019, there was a rate increase, and there was a EES performed an electric rate study. And that looked at the next 5 years, and it identified and proposed and council adopted rate increases for the electric division. Those increases are no longer taking place in 2024. This proposal, Agenda 4B, proposes to increase rates year after year based on CPI. That increase is based on the understanding that if rates are not increased by CPI, the city will be in a position akin to our stormwater rates, where large increases will be required to conduct the capital improvements that are necessary. So this project, or this effort, would then increase rates from 2024 over the next few years based on CPI, and that would allow the city to continue communication and coordination with both TPU and Bonneville as we look at our substation, potential replacement, or reconfiguration of transmission lines. So are there any questions at this time for a CPI increase?
Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mayor. If we were to look at the last 5 years at the consumer price index as related to electrical utility increases, do you know how much of an increase it would have been for the last 5 years? Would we be looking at a 5 times 4.5 or almost 25% increase?
I do not have that number in front of me, but I can have it ready next week.
And I think numbers like that would give us an idea of what we're spending even in the future, what it's going to be. Now, 4.5, 4.6% for the 1 year doesn't seem like a terrible increase. It's a lot less than we think. But just how does that spread out over, say, 5 years? And we would also have to look at how our expenses spread out over 5 years, increase and so forth. But I think it would just give us a little bit more knowledge of what we're buying into using the CPI, again, for another utility, and what it comes out to over so many years. I think it's probably easily justified. But it's a lot better than going 5 years without an increase and then increasing 25%.
Great.
Just get that view in mind.
And we can pull that number really easy because it's on each budget document on the wage scale. I can tell you that the lowest since I've been here, because of negotiation, it's on the top of my head, but it's 0.9% was 1 year.
Yeah.
And I think the highest we had was 10.1, and that was extreme. But I think on average, it's usually around 4 to 5%, but we can pull those numbers for the next meeting.
Yeah. And I can understand the justification for charging as much as it costs us. And that's an appropriate way to do business. But just to look at it, it gives you a little comfort level in what we're doing. But it's the easiest way to do it, probably the most justified by the cost, by the indexes.
Yeah, we'll get those numbers. Councilmember Peretti and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and I appreciate what Councilmember Whalen is saying here. What would be helpful for me to understand also is our cost of Bonneville, because we have a cost from Bonneville per kilowatt hour or whatever that we're getting from Bonneville versus our cost of doing business as the city of Milton of having an electrical department, because those are two costs that we deal with. And how has Bonneville increased their rates over the last 5 years? And we can extrapolate from that, knowing how much we've increased our rates in total, but what percentages is that really out of our control because of Bonneville's costs that are going up each year that they charge us. And then it would also make us have the understanding or allow us to have the understanding of then what is the cost of doing business as an electrical company on top of what Bonneville is charging us. Does that make sense?
It does. So what are the wholesale costs for power from Bonneville?
Right.
And then what's our operational costs?
Correct, yeah. That would be very helpful. If I can add to that, because my concerning of CPI is that you run into these years where CPI is a huge percentage, and I struggle with that without having caveats in there where we're not just adopting CPI all the time, because you can have these 8-point and 10-point and 12-point years under CPI, but then the following year it could be a whatever, as the economy changes like that. So it's a little bit, it's hard to, and I know that it impacts when we're negotiating contracts with our unions and everything else when that's going on. But that's why I still struggle with the CPI way of doing things, just because we've been hit sometimes about those huge years. And it's hard to go to our voters and say, hey, now you're going to pay 15% or 12% more this year for electricity,
Understood.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Yeah, these increases, I mean, they need to be covered because we have the different costs from Bonneville, BPA. We have, and our own costs, and I'm big on also, you want to have enough that you can do the capital improvements that you want to do, need to do. So you're not stuck doing what we did a few years ago and having to increase the rates significantly to cover when we hadn't done it. So I think we need to, I think it's better to do it, incrementally over a long period of time, obviously, than one big hit like we did with the stormwater. But yeah, I agree too with the CPI, because it can move so dramatically. I think you also have to base it on what our operational costs are, what our capital improvement, what we want to do in that arena, and also just to be able to keep the utility solvent.
Councilmember White?
Do we have any data in terms of how our rates compare to other private and public electric utilities like Puget Sound Energy and Tacoma Power and Light, just so that we can gauge where we sit within the market as far as rates go?
Yes, I can pull that information and provide it next time, next Monday. And I'll take a look at all of the surrounding electric utilities that are adjacent to the city of Milton. And I'll have that information for you.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Hang on, Councilmember Strader or Councilmember Hall, do either of you have questions before I do another round? You don't have, I mean, you can think about it, but
So we're only looking at increasing this year. We have a projection going forward.
it would be CPI every year.
It'd be CPI.
Yeah, because we adopted the, 5-year plan or 4-year plan? I can't remember what it was.
In 2019.
Yeah, and then that has expired, and so we wrote this resolution to increase the 4.6 this year, and then every following year by CPI.
Thank you.
Councilmember Strader, did you have a question? Nope, okay. Councilmember Peretti and then Councilmember Whalen.
And I'm kind of recall conversations that we've had in the past regarding CPI. It seems like we wanted to, in our ordinances, have a caveat that it's also approved by us, or we can make changes or whatever if it's a case that we don't want to do a 12% increase, you know. Didn't we have discussions like that?
Yeah,
That we want to
as
have
we
a-
were sitting here, I was thinking, I think we had a discussion we were going to do it for water, but then we ended up adopting a different plan. But I thought we were going to put a cap. So it's CPI up to a certain percentage. And if it went over that, then we'd have to come to council for approval. I'm drawing a blank on what the cap was. I thought, I'm drawing a blank. But we did have that conversation that we would put it as CPI up to X amount.
Right.
And then it would, if it was over that X amount and we felt we needed more, then we would come to council to ask for additional.
Yeah, so I'd like to see that in there somehow,
Yep.
whatever that
Okay.
would be, you know, that, so we have capability of that.
Okay.
And then my other question was, just in your rate chart, when I'm seeing a 100-watt yard light, is that a light that's then provided by the city, or how, I mean, you see a charge for a 100-watt yard light and a 200-watt yard light. How has that charge occurred?
Oh, under the commercial rate structure? Yes.
might
So
be
how are we billing that and how are we monitoring its accuracy?
How is that? Because only because I know up at Faith Family, we have changed all of our lights outside to LEDs, which are like zero cost, we're noticing, I mean, very minimal cost. And it's like, well, you can get a 400-watt LED light that just costs you pennies now, you know? So I'm just wondering how this, you know, that figures out through that.
Yes, I will, I'll provide some additional information
Okay, I
on yard
appreciate it.
lights also.
Okay.
Councilmember Whalen, did you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And I think the city installs yard lights, the poles and so forth. It's just not the cost of the power of it. It's not your personal yard light. The city is involved with putting it in. So that's where I think some of the expense is. But yes, they should go to LEDs.
Yeah, and I'm just curious about the charges that are listed here. How is that charge
Yeah.
occurred? I mean, how does that happen? You know,
No, I
I'm
think-
not, what is that for? What is that service for?
And I think it's based a lot for installation and equipment to put the light on and so forth. But I could be very wrong. But we've got one big elephant in the room we haven't talked about, and that's the substation. Haven't heard anything about it. We haven't had any particular plans. We don't have any particular way of increased funding, which may be the elephant in the room eventually. Can we get an update on what's happening about the substation? That was, for years, that was a thought to be catastrophe that's going to happen at any year. And we seem to have lived for the last 10 years with the substation we have. We've tried to buy land, this, that, and the other. We've put a lot of investment in it. But can we get an update for when or how or what the cost is going to be for the substation, which in some regards is part of the consumer price index, potentially?
Potentially, anecdotal information from some of our adjacent utilities is that the cost of a substation has doubled in the last 4 years, the cost of installation. And yes, they had significant delays with materials. There was significant delays in just acquiring the transformers. Some of those delays and those workflows have been worked out, and they're accessible again. You can receive transformers without waiting 18 months. But yes, I can provide you an update, maybe next week is better, because then I can work with finance to pull some financial information. But our current status on the substation is that where it was proposed across the street on Fife from the existing substation, that location had significant hurdles for construction that made it very expensive. It had contamination issues. It was significantly saturated. And with the Hylabos changing of the floodplain related to WashDOT's project, that area could even be wetter. And so it was determined about 2 years ago that that was an unfeasible location for a substation. Since then, we've been working with BPA to understand what the city's obligation is to take on ownership of the substation. There is not an obligation that I have found. It's that BPA wants out of the substation business, and so they are encouraging municipalities to purchase those. It is a specialized team of personnel that you need to work on a substation. It's not our standard linemen that we have. And so it would be a significant lift for the city of Milton, which is why my current thought process on that is that we discuss it with TPU, we discuss it with Bonneville, but we don't over-obligate ourselves to take ownership of it because it comes with significant costs and hurdles.
And I can remember 20 years of council discussion about the need to get a substation replacement. And it's been 20 years and we have the same substation, upgraded equipment and so forth. But I thought we also had, didn't we, we were seeking loan money at one particular time, and we had a line of credit that we could have used. And I still don't know if that's an active line of credit that we have.
Yeah, I don't think we drew finance or Director Simpson. I'm not sure if you know the top of your head, but I don't think we drew much off that loan. And is that loan expiring soon or? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's just something to refresh with, because we haven't talked about it in a long time.
Yeah.
And it's not as big a catastrophe, I think, as we thought it was going to be, but it still could be.
Yeah.
Because last we talked about it was going to replace the substation in the same location that we have today with mediation, you know, for the ground and so forth. We lost the opportunity to purchase the building next to it. Morley, was it? So that's, you know, still out there. I don't want anybody to forget that that elephant is charging down the road at us. We have to be able to feed it.
The city is undertaking currently, it's part of the substation, but it's the getaways. So it's the cables that come out of the transformer and start feeding our city distribution system. We are upgrading all of the getaways this year. One of the things that kind of spurred that effort forward was Bridge and the line replacement upgrades that are required to power their facility. And so Bridge is currently undertaking $1 million of electric line upgrades for their feeder. And so the city is upgrading the other 2 feeders. We have 3 total at the same time, just for realizing economy of scale and reducing overall costs.
And all that power is coming through our substation, is it not?
That power is coming through our substation.
It's a huge increase in the demand on the substation, and we've been quiet about it. It's something I think we need to seriously look at for the next couple of years if we have to.
Agreed.
Just throw that in when we're talking about utility rate increases, because somewhere it's going to get paid for. Okay. thank
Let me
you.
have Mayor Pro Tem go first and then Councilmember Peretti.
Yeah, I remember when we initially voted in that rate increase that it was, yes, we did take a loan that was going to be used to buy a new or rebuild the substation. And yes, I do recall that we did put in there, yeah, the CPI was going to cover it. But we initially did that because we needed to cover the cost of that. So it seems like we do need to do that. And I recall that when we went through that and it was, the numbers were given to us, even with the increase, we were still going to be less than BP, or than Tacoma Power and also PSC, even with that. And I remember that being that was kind of the impetus to us wanting to keep the power station and keep it under our control, so then we wouldn't be having rates that they have for Tacoma and with PSC. That's what I'm thinking. That's why it was surprising that, yes, I agree with Councilmember Whalen that we weren't getting reports along the way of where the substation, where that part of it was going. But regardless, we're going to have to do something, and with the substation, to upgrade it to a level that, it's been there for a while.
Councilmember Peretti.
Yeah, and I think, I want to make our understanding is that our point of presence is the 3 zones coming out of the transformer. Is that?
That is our ownership.
Yes, that's our point of presence on that with ownership. Right, because I remember working on this project many years ago, and the problem we had is that, yeah, Bonneville wants to get out of the substation business, but they kind of want you to say, yeah, you're going to take this over without them going, and we know the age of that transformer, and we know the problems we have with that property and what you have to do to a piece of property when you've had a transformer like that for so long, and the contamination that's happened there. That's their responsibility right now.
Yes.
And as soon as we take ownership, that changes that whole game. And that's why I'm very leery about moving ahead with our own substation until we know exactly what Bonneville's going to do, and especially if we use that same property, if they're not going to be on the hook for contamination and everything, because that's their responsibility right now in that substation, not ours. Our point of presence is coming out of there, not in that substation. And so that's,
That's my understanding also.
yeah.
Councilmember White, did you have a comment? No?
No.
No? Okay. Sorry, I thought you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
I can try
No, nope, you don't have to make one up. It's okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So this will come back next week, and then we will get the questions that were asked answered for the next meeting. Let's see, that means we are finished tonight, so I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Is there any objection? All right, meeting adjourned at 8:09.